We're back in session and appreciate your patience with us as we navigate a fire drill here in the education building, but we're back in session. I now recognize the chair of the Healthy Responsible Student Committee, Mr. Reginald Keenan. Mr. Keenan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and everyone today. Mr. Chair, we have two items, one for new business and, of course, one for discussion. And I'm Reginald Keenan, of course, with my, as I always say, my good friend Alan Duncan serves on this committee. And we have some good information. We have, I think, good works that we want to talk about that definitely will help promote education equity. So in new business, we're going to ask Ms. Angel Batts to begin the presentation for the first item.
Good afternoon, Chairman Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Johnson, board members, advisors, my colleagues at DPI, stakeholders, and community members. It is an honor to be here today. I am Angel Goodwine Batts, and I have the privilege to lead and support the Integrated Academic and Behavior Systems team, also known as IABS. Today, we will be sharing the overall connections of the North Carolina Multi-Tiered System of Support, MTSS, the whole school, whole community, whole child model, and social and emotional learning. We'll also be updating you on the SEL work that is happening in our state and beyond. We'll also hear from one of our districts and share what this looks like at the district, school, and classroom levels. The IABS team is now a member of the District and Regional Support Division. Within the division, there is a continuum of support and services. Because the work of the IABS team is centered around supporting all PSUs and independent public schools, our work begins with statewide services and continues to support throughout the entire system and framework. As the IABS team continues to support implementation and sustainability of the North Carolina MTSS framework, we are intentional in ensuring that we keep this equity definition in the view of our thinking, planning, and implementation. What we are excited to share with you today is the intentional, active, and collaborative work that is happening across the state to get us closer to bringing this North Carolina State Board of Education equity definition to reality. Elements of social and emotional learning, as SEL, already exist across numerous models, frameworks, and supports utilized by North Carolina public school units. One of those models is the whole school, whole community, whole child model. This model is a national cross-sector framework that is used by national, state, district, and school level partners. The coordinated school health model places the health of students in the context of the whole school and whole community, and recognizes that much of what affects the health and academic performance of children results from factors such as access or lack of access to resources. The whole child model looks across 10 health components, as they are all connected for well-being. This systemic SEO work aligns with the State Board of Education's Whole Child Committee. Whole Child and North Carolina MTSS work collaboratively to support systemic SEL. We work together to create environments where all students can thrive. North Carolina's MTSS is also inclusive of social emotional learning. As you recall from previous presentations about North Carolina MTSS, it is a school improvement framework which encompasses a full continuum of academic, attendance, behavioral, and social and emotional instruction and support. North Carolina MTSS is the guiding framework being utilized for systemic social and emotional learning and school mental health across North Carolina's public school units. Districts and schools who are using North Carolina MTSS to build their core social and emotional support for all students and adults across their district and schools are shining a light on the inequities that exist in their buildings. SEL creates an environment in the schools where we can have the needed crucial conversations that will lead to change. In August, Dr. Matt Hoskins shared that SEL is a lever for equity. As stated in this Castle State Education Agency Theory of Action, SEL can be a powerful lever for creating caring, just, inclusive, and in healthy communities that support all individuals in reaching their fullest potential. Systemic implementation of SEL fosters and depends on equitable learning environments where all students and adults feel respected, valued, and affirmed in their individual interests, talents, social identities, cultural values, and backgrounds. While SEL alone will not solve longstanding and deep-seated inequities in our education system, it can help states, districts, and schools promote understanding, examine biases, reflect on and address the impact of racism and other isms, build cross-cultural relationships, and cultivate adult and student practices that close opportunity gaps and create more inclusive school communities. This requires that SEL be implemented with an explicit goal of promoting educational equity. SEL and mental health are often lumped together and sometimes even used as interchangeable terminology. We need to be very clear that there is a strong connection, but these are not interchangeable terms. When we incorporate social and emotional learning for both students and adults, we equip students and staff with skills and competencies to effectively manage their behavior, emotions, and relationships with others. We also create safe, productive, restorative, and enjoyable learning communities where each student, staff, and family member experiences mutual respect and a sense of belonging. Research supports that these impacts of social and emotional learning result in the mental illness prevention. So we think about SEL as a part of the overall mental wellness continuum. Today, we're going to look deeper at the state team driving this SEL work, the North Carolina Social and Emotional Implementation Team. The goal of this team is to scale up social and emotional learning across North Carolina. This team is led by my colleague, Mrs. Beth Rice.
Thank you, Ms. Batts, and thank you to Drs. Emery and Martin for your support of this work. I'm honored to share an update on systemic social and emotional learning in North Carolina schools. During COVID-19, we collaborated with some of you to develop resources for the field through the COVID-19 SEL and Crisis Response Practice Guide. Within this guide, we provided resources for utilizing the 3 signature practices, which are welcoming inclusion activities, engaging strategies, and an optimistic closure. We can envision these strategies as a bigger system of core supports for both staff and students. We believe it is especially critical to leverage these 3 signature practices right now, given the current environment, for a couple of reasons. They promote safety and predictability, which reduces staff and student stress and allows us to engage psychologically and cognitively. They enhance staff and student voice, which builds a feeling of empowerment and supports our broader equity work. They help to build connections and a sense of belonging. We know that feeling a part of something that matters is critical during highly stressful times, especially when there is constant change. They also allow opportunities for teaching, modeling, and practicing the SEL competencies. So to get us started, we will engage in a welcoming inclusion activity. As you think about your work and our work around equity and the whole child, what is one thing that you hope we hear from our young people? I'm going to pause for about 30 seconds, and if you're comfortable, you're welcome to add your thinking to the chat window.
Beth,
Yes,
since we're in the public realm and the chat is an available function,
it's not.
we
Okay.
need to move forward.
Thank you, Dr. So we will move forward, and I will continue to post. Is it okay, Dr. Townsend, to still post the prompt in the chat window? Does that help?
Not really, because we are in the public realm.
Okay, I'll just repeat it each time. So what happen next is I would share some of what that you were able to put in the chat window, and it helps to build this sense of community. And you also connect that with the person's name. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more around the NC-SEL implementation team. So in partnership with Castle, the 3 practices is supported by a team at the state level. That is what you see on the screen right now. This cross-agency and cross-division team works to support statewide scale-up of social and emotional learning. I would just add that this is a very mighty team. We are collaborative, and there is really powerful work that is coming out of this team. So as I share this update today, it's really on behalf of all of those that are a part of this team. So we will share a few highlights, some historical information about the team's work, as well as some considerations for your support as a state board of education. So here you can see those key highlights, both from 2019 and 2020. And as you are well aware, COVID-19 has highlighted the importance of this work. This has resulted in an implementation team providing resources to the field to support their implementation of SEL, including the integration of the 3 signature practices. So now we're going to pause for an engaging strategy. From your perspective, what are 1 to 2 of the most critical skills for all North Carolina students to be career, college, and community ready? And if you have something that you can, a little piece of paper or your laptop, you're welcome to jot down what you believe are 1 to 2 of the most critical skills for all North Carolina students to be career, college, and community ready. So as we continue, I'm going to invite you in 2 slides to reflect on these skills and make some connections to the SEL competencies. In January of 2019, we completed this activity with NCDPI Division Director. Just over 90% of the critical skills aligned to the SEL competencies that I'm about to share. We also know that employers value social and emotional learning. 92% of surveyed executives say skills such as problem solving and communicating clearly are equally or more important than technical skills. And the 10 skills identified by the World Economic Forum included complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence, judgment and decision making, service orientation, negotiation, and cognitive flexibility. As we continue, you will see connect these important skills and the 5 SEL competencies. So here you can see the updated Castle framework. And I'm going to quickly hit a couple of highlights. SEL is integral to education and overall human development. SEL is a process. This is a learning process, and it is asset-based. SEL advances educational equity, which is critical for all of our North Carolina public schools. Also, notice the competencies in the center of the wheel. The orange skills are so self-awareness, self-management, And then we see a focus on others as the green skills of social awareness and relationship skills. And finally, responsible decision making is in yellow. You might notice the circle surrounding these SEO competencies, including impact on classrooms through SEO instruction and classroom climate, impact on the school-wide through school-wide culture, practices, and policies, and impact with our families and caregivers through authentic partnerships, and impact throughout our communities through aligned learning environments. Now take a moment to recall the 1 to 2 critical skills you recorded 2 slides ago. As I talk through these 5 SEL competencies, take a moment to compare where your skills align. So self-awareness, the ability to understand one's own emotions, thoughts, and values, including identifying personal, cultural, linguistic assets, examining prejudices and biases. Self-management, ability to manage our emotions, thoughts, behaviors effectively and in different situations, and achieve goals and aspirations, including managing and feeling motivated. Social awareness, ability to understand the perspectives of and empathize with others, including those from diverse backgrounds, cultures, and contexts. This includes feeling compassion for others, understanding the broader historical and social norms for behavior, taking perspectives, identifying diverse social norms, including unjust ones, and understanding influence of systems on behavior. Relationship skills, the abilities to establish and maintain healthy and supportive relationships, and to effectively navigate diverse individuals and groups, including communicating clearly, listening actively, cooperating, working collaboratively to problem solve and negotiate conflict constructively, navigating settings with differing social and cultural demands, and providing leadership and responsible decision making. This is the ability to make caring and constructive choices about personal behavior and social interactions across diverse situations, including consideration of ethical standards and safety concerns, evaluating benefits and consequences of various actions for personal, social, and well-being. You will notice curiosity and open-mindedness, identifying solutions, and reflecting on one's role to promote personal, family, and community well-being. So I imagine as you reflect on your 1 to 2 skills, you may have seen some alignment with these 5 competencies. Now I'm going to push us a little bit further. So as we look at these competencies and we think about our equity work moving forward, which of these competencies or skills might be critical for our adults? Now let's apply these 5 core competencies to a school. Where is social and emotional learning needed in a school building? SEL is relevant throughout our school buildings. It is needed in every space as you look at that aerial map on the left-hand side. Often when staff and or teams begin talking about social and emotional learning, everyone looks at the school counselor or specialized instructional support staff, like our school psychologists, our school social workers, and school nurses. However, as we continue in this SEL conversation, we hope it will be apparent why the SEL knowledge, skills, and practices must reside with all staff to support all students across all our school buildings. We call this broader work systemic SEL. This is what you see on the right-hand side of the screen. And we work with teams to implement these indicators of school-wide social and emotional learning. So again, as Ms. Batch shared, social and emotional learning already exists across numerous models, frameworks, and supports utilized by North Carolina public school units. SEL is integrated into academic instruction. It does not take away from instruction. SEL actually enhances academic instruction. And all learning is both social and emotional. We support systemic SEL through an aligned cascading system of support. Every layer of the system works on 4 key areas, and these are shown on the left: building foundational support and plan, strengthening adult SEL competencies and capacities, promoting SEL for students, and practicing continuous improvement. From our work with district teams and school teams and national advisors, we are able to design and support the use of meaningful resources. At the state level, you can see a first step for building foundational support and plan is developing a statewide shared vision. Today, I am so honored to share our statewide vision that was created largely with student voice. I will also share our goals, 2 key resources for strengthening adult SEL and promoting SEL for students, and one way that we are both practicing continuous improvement and providing implementation guidance. So we have a vision for emotional learning, which was the result of listening to our NC stakeholders, primarily students from across the state. We offered both focus groups and surveys to young people and adults. From the responses of over 450 students and 76 adults, we provide the vision for social and emotional learning for North Carolina public schools. As I read this vision statement, I invite you to pull out words that you believe are most critical to your work as a State Board of Education member. North Carolina pre-K through 12 public schools are safe, productive, restorative, and enjoyable learning communities where each student, staff, and family member experiences mutual respect and a sense of belonging. In partnership with families and communities, our schools provide equitable academic, social, emotional, and behavioral learning through positive relationships and modeling by compassionate adults. Immersed in a supportive system, our staff value their own social and emotional learning as a form of self-care. They care for their colleagues and for our students. The same supportive system produces resilient students who graduate empowered to solve problems, communicate effectively, empathize with others, and pursue goals for further education, employment, and contribution to their communities. From the focus group and surveys from both young people and adults, we constructed the following 3 goals for systemic SEL. As I share these goals, I invite you to think about which goal might be a strength for North Carolina and where we currently have the greatest growth. Build and align state structure to support social and emotional learning. Identify and promote statewide use of best practices for adult and student social emotional learning. Track, assess, and share advancements in social and emotional learning across the state. As noted in the executive summary, this work aligns with multiple education goals. You might be concerned about how we implement both SEL and teach academics. We would say that many are already doing both, and this is possible through intentional integration of SEL into academic content areas. Our work at the state level is as easy as possible for every classroom across our state. Here are some ways that we are already doing this. To strengthen adult SEL and promote SEL for students, we have 2 resources that have been shared with the field. First, the NC-SEL Standards Mapping resources. These are images 1 and 2. These show connections between standards in 12 content areas and the SEL competencies. Each document provides acknowledgments and introduction and activities and practices across the core competencies and standards alignment with each of these SEL competencies. Second, throughout the month of October, we provided a webinar series focused on integrating SEL into the content areas. Here you can see that 8 content areas supported this webinar series, which was live streamed by NC Public Schools. These recorded sessions were also made available to you. Finally, we launched the NC SEO and Equity Project. The project includes 42 PSUs across North Carolina, including traditional LEAs, charter schools, and regionally based lab schools. Every other month, we bring teams together to discuss current implementation and process activities from our online course, Core SEL Practices, which provides guidance on building and implementing SEL supports within an MTSS. We also bring together district-level contacts to collaborate in a community of practice where we continue to listen and learn together. With this work, we have leveraged a key resource, which our next speaker helped to create through their work with Castle's Equity Work Group. With that being said, I'm honored to introduce another dedicated educator, Lisa Brenner, Director of Social and Emotional Learning in Guilford County Schools. Guilford County Schools participates in Castle's Collaborating Districts Initiative, which aligns to our Castle Collaborating States Initiative. They also participate in the NC SEO and Equity Project and are represented on the NC SEO Implementation team.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. I am honored to have the opportunity to be here today and share Guilford County Schools' journey of systemic SEL implementation. To give you a brief overview of Guilford County Schools, we are the state's third largest district under the direction of Dr. Sharon Contreras, who is a champion for SEL and equity. Thank you, Dr. Contreras, for your ongoing support and leadership. Guilford County Schools serves over 70,000 students, and as you can see from this slide, we are a very diverse county with 160 languages and dialects spoken, and we have over 10,000 staff members, which is important to keep in mind throughout this presentation because you will see that we spent a lot of time focusing on adults. Guilford County Schools' partnership with Castle's collaborating districts began in January 2019. This partnership provides Guilford County Schools with the opportunity to work closely with Castle consultants who provide coaching for systemic SEL implementation. It also provides GCS with the opportunity to participate in a professional learning community with partnership districts throughout the country. Since that time, we've been extremely busy focusing on implementing district-wide and school-wide SEL. Much like the state, GCS has been utilizing Castle's theory of action. We started out by focusing on organizing our work. Then we began the implementation phase, and throughout all of this, we have focused on continuous improvement. I'll share a little bit more about each of these areas throughout this presentation. As we started to think about organizing our work around systemic SEL, our initial priority was to bring together leaders from across the district to help champion the SEL work by serving on a district SEL leadership team. Members of this team include approximately 40 district departmental leaders, administrators, and teachers. This includes representation from areas such as academics, diversity, equity, and inclusion, MTSS, exceptional children, student services, and operations, as well as whole school, whole community, whole child representation. At each of our meetings, members engage in continuous SEL professional learning, as well as provide valuable input and guidance that is used to steer our work. Bringing the members' unique perspectives together has ensured alignment with other district initiatives and is helping embed SEL within all areas of Guilford County Schools. The leadership team members have played a critical role in communicating what SEL is, increasing awareness of the research findings about the benefits of SEL, and promoting SEL programs, approaches, and practices in classrooms and schools. The next step in our organizing phase involved dedicating staff to support this work. Prior to our partnership with Castle, GCS engaged in Castle's SEL readiness and engagement analysis. One of the recommendations from the report was to hire or identify staff members who can be dedicated to advancing systemic SEL efforts in the district. To do this, we started by looking at our existing staff to see how we could align their work with our focus on systemic SEL. We brought in a staff member with a strong background in PBIS implementation that had also been working with our multi-tiered systems of support team. A staff member with a counseling background to help enhance and implement bullying prevention supports and programming. And a service learning specialist with classroom experience to enhance our K-12 service learning opportunities, which allow students and adults the option to put their SEL skills into practice. All of these support systemic SEL. Next, we developed the SEL specialist job. These positions provide school-based SEL implementation, coaching for our SEL cohort schools, general SEL supports for non-cohort schools, and facilitate a wide range of professional learning opportunities for school staff, district staff, and parents. We currently have 4 SEL specialists in the district whose primary role is to support district-wide and school-wide SEL implementation. Once we had our staffing in place, the SEO Leadership Team helped to develop our district SEL vision, ensuring it aligned with our district's overall mission, vision, and values. During the initial stage of organizing, we also developed a 3.5-year SEL roadmap. Our SEL roadmap is a high-level document that outlines our district's rollout plan for systemic SEL implementation. The SEL leadership team provided input into the SEL roadmap, which is critical because many of the implementation targets required collaboration with other district offices and teams. During the 2019-20 school year, we developed a blueprint for SEL in the district, which includes continuous improvement process in collaboration with our research and evaluation department. We launched professional development that cultivates adult SEL, social and emotional competence with an equity alignment in collaboration with our diversity, equity, and inclusion office. We launched our first cohort of schools implementing school-wide systemic SEL, which began by supporting adult SEL. And we focused on designing an SEL and academic integration model in collaboration with representatives from academics and DEI. During the 2020-21 school year, our focus has been on strengthening and expanding adult SEL development across the district, embedding SEL into select academic content areas, including SEL and new teacher supports, identifying SEL programs for explicit SEL instruction, and infusing SEL into our family and community partnerships. As I stated before, our implementation process began with developing and implementing adult professional learning. The SEL specialist and additional SEL team members have designed and provided SEL professional learning series for cohort schools, as well as opportunities for principals, curriculum facilitators, teachers, transportation services staff, support staff, and classified staff, parents, and more. This has been done in collaboration with our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and aligned with the MTSS framework. We have now launched 2 cohorts of schools focused on school-wide SEL implementation. These schools chose to participate in the SEL cohort and use the 10 indicators of school-wide SEL that Ms. Rice shared earlier as a guide. Each school has demonstrated their commitment to this work by identifying a building level SEL lead, developing a school-based team to lead the SEL work, cultivating adult SEL by ensuring that all school staff participate in professional learning opportunities, and participate in data collection and continuous improvement efforts. Cohort schools receive professional learning co-developed with CASEL, on-site biweekly coaching from SEL specialists to deepen learning, and Implementation, access to intensive resources and support, a multi-year process that builds upon existing programming and efforts and aligns to the MTSS framework, an explicit focus on adult SEL, inclusion of SEL integration into academic content areas beginning in year 2, and a school-specific strategies to implement SEL successfully at the core level. At the district level, we have aligned our work with the 10 indicators of district SEL implementation. Focusing initially on adult SEL, we provide ongoing training opportunities for district staff and departments. We are fortunate to have strong relationships with numerous departments with whom we regularly collaborate. Our collaborative work includes professional learning opportunities, focus on academic integration, and a joint Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion SEL Advisory Council to help guide our work. Additionally, we have focused on developing and curating relevant resources and tools. Although this is something we started in the beginning, it became particularly important when we shifted into remote learning as a response to COVID-19. One of the first things we did was cultivate SEL resources and activities for parents and families to engage in to help children and adults navigate through the uncertain time. We hosted webinars for certified and classified staff, as well as webinars for parents and caregivers, which we offered through our Guilford County Schools Parent Academy. We utilized NCDPI's COVID-19 SEL and Crisis Response Practice Guide and CASEL's Reunite, Renew, and Thrive SEL Roadmap to Reopening Schools Guide to create and provide relevant and responsive trainings and resources for educators. And we adapted the 3 signature practices playbook, which includes welcoming and inclusive activities, engaging practices, and optimistic closers for a virtual settings. We had 2 separate books, one for administrators and one for teachers. Throughout our systemic SEL implementation process, we have focused on continuous improvement. To do this, we started by partnering with our DCS Office of Research and Evaluation and CASEL's Office of Research and Practice. We created and implemented SMARTY goals. SMARTY goals are the extension of the widely utilized SMART goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound to include an I and an E, which stand for inclusive and equitable. We administered pre- and post-staff surveys for our SEL cohort schools to measure impact and captured key insights from feedback surveys for all of our professional learning engagements. We utilize a rapid learning cycle, which is to identify and make changes as needed in real time. And so thank you for the honor of allowing me to share some of the work we're doing in Guilford County Schools to implement systemic SEL. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Brenner. Due to the lateness of time and sort of off schedule, we will not have any opportunity for questions at this time, but that was some very good data given to us, the information. The consideration that y'all asked the board to consider, there's, I think it was three considerations that you want us to keep in mind, and we as a board will continue to keep SEL out front because I think it's necessary for our children to become better students. And Mr. Chair, with that, that will finish up the new business item. We have discussion from Dr. Essick. HRS Healthy Active Children Progress Report, an update.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. This is Ellen Essick. Chairman Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Johnson, thanks for giving us the opportunity to share data on the Healthy Active Children policy. We bring this to you each year. You have in your information the full report, and that's a PowerPoint that has many more slides than what I'll share today. I'll just hit on highlights today of the Healthy Active Children policy report, and then share a little bit about our request about the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. It takes a full team to do the work, and just a quick look at our team, and Les Spell, our data and policy consultants, on with me in case you have specific data questions that he can help answer today. So we collect three major types of data that our team collects: the school health profiles, which is going on right now, the Healthy Active Children Progress Report, which I'll be reporting to you on today, and then the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which many of our LEAs use to help inform their work for the Healthy Active Children policy work. Like always, we ground all the work in the whole school, whole community, whole child framework. I think it's especially important to note, and I'll share some examples a little bit later on, how important the community is to all this work, especially during this time of COVID, and I'll share about that in a few minutes. So the policy itself has 7 sections. I will be suggesting that you all add an 8th section a little bit later in the presentation. So just a few quick highlights, and then I'll dive into the data a little bit deeper. The 2020 highlights, we had a 100% response rate from 116 LEAs. It takes a little time, and folks are really busy, but we were happy to be able to get responses from all 116 LEAs. 30% of our LEAs said that their school health advisory councils met at least quarterly, and that's down due to COVID, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to that specific slide. 70% of our LEAs said that their school health advisory councils provide annual reports to their local board of education, and we're excited to hear that and hope that will continue to go up. And then 64% of our schools provided staff wellness programs to their staff. So looking at physical education, the policy encourages schools to move toward 150 minutes of physical education at the elementary level, taught by a certified physical education specialist. 46% of our LEAs say that all of their students got 150 minutes of physical education daily, weekly. The policy also requires that we move toward 225 minutes of healthful living education at the middle school level. 47% of our LEAs said that all their students got 225 minutes of healthful living, that's health education and physical education together, weekly. And the other requirement for that is that they divide that half and half. And if you look at the next slide, you'll see that 58% of our LEAs said that they did divide their healthful living course equally between physical education and health education. And you might notice, if you've thought about it, I mean, you may not have seen last year's data, but this data has stayed pretty consistent over the last few years. And a lot of that has to do with staffing and space and equipment issues. School districts provide the physical education and healthful living that they can, given the limitations they have with staffing and oftentimes space for physical education. So we ask our school health advisory councils, or SHACs, as I'll call them throughout this presentation, how often they met. And those that met at least quarterly, if you notice in 2019, that went down to 55%, and we had hurricanes in 2019 that had an impact on that. In 2020, that went down to 30%, but right when we began collecting this data was about the time that schools got out due to COVID. So that went down. Some of our districts met virtually, but many of them did not. So that's our help explains that decrease. And you can look at this slide. It just gives you an idea. Scroll up just a little bit, Deanna, to see the scale, but you can get an idea of how many times folks met, and how many times their school health advisory councils met. So we also ask our LEAs what types of tools did they use to assess where they were with their health-related issues and their LEAs. 59% use the local wellness policy, and I'll talk more about that when we get to nutrition in a few minutes. Many of them are using the School Health Index, which is an assessment tool that assesses all areas of the whole school, whole community, whole child model. And then many of them use an assessment tool that we have created and provided to them that primarily looks at youth risk behavior survey data. We also said, what do you use to inform the decisions you make for your school health advisory councils and your LEAs? 80% use their Healthy Active Children policy report. When they send in their answers, Les takes that and sends them a PDF back every year so they can see how they've done the previous year. And then they use that to make some decisions about where they need to work. 63% of our LEAs use the youth risk behavior survey, which is very valuable data, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And then they use a few other types of data as well. So every year we provide to you what our LEAs say are their top focus areas. And for the first time this year, nutrition is not one of the top 3. And I think that's not a negative. I think that speaks to the amount of energy and effort that have been put into making sure that our students are fed. And I'll talk a little bit more about that with local wellness policies in a few minutes. But what did come into the top 3 this year was health education. And I think that's incredibly important and notable. To move into this time of COVID, so many of the things that we need to teach students, from hand washing to physical space, emotional well-being, and vaping, all of those kinds of things are part of the health education essential standards, and many of those were being taught in our schools during this time. Also, safe school environment. Again, if you'll remember in October, I provided data to you from our youth risk behavior survey about students not feeling safe at school. And so many of our LEAs are working to address those needs using some of their school safety funds, as well as just making that a priority. And then obviously number 1, mental health, and that has stayed number 1 for the last few years. Employee wellness. Obviously that's an important issue for our schools right now too, the well-being of our staff. 45 of our LEAs say that all of their schools and their LEAs provide staff wellness programs. And then another 22 say that over half of their schools get employee wellness programs. So very important to provide that support for our staff as well. So when we talk about physical activity, the Healthy Active Children policy requires that LEAs get K through 8, students get 30 minutes of physical activity daily, and that's moderate to vigorous physical activity. 98% of our elementary schools say that all of their students get that 30 minutes of physical activity daily, mostly through recess, through their physical education classes, and through energizers, classroom energizers that are provided to them through us and from online supports as well. At the middle school level, that drops a bit. In the next slide, you'll see that 80% of our middle school students receive 30 minutes of daily moderate to vigorous physical activity. And most of our middle school students get that through their physical education classes. And then some of our middle school teachers also use classroom energizers throughout the day. Another requirement in the policy is that no school or teacher withhold recess as a form of punishment for students or to make up extra work. And we're happy to see that each year this is going up more and more. This needs to be 100%, and we hope to get it there, but we're glad to see the increases that fewer of our schools are withholding recess as a form of punishment. So community involvement, if you'll go ahead to the next slide. We've asked our districts are you sharing your facilities? Are you using community facilities to benefit your students and staff? And 95% of our LEAs have joint use agreements with their community. 3% say they still share facilities, but they don't have a formal agreement, but it doesn't mean they're not sharing some of those facilities. We also ask our LEAs, where do you get your support from us? 70% got it from our Healthy Schools website, which is actually our Google site, emails with our staff, or the school nutrition site, and then finally with the state public health staff. If you remember that very first slide with our kind of team, we consider Ann Nichols, who's the state school nurse consultant, one of our team members, as she has 8 regional consultants who often support and work with our districts as well. And then we ask LEAs, what do you need from us? And this will help us tremendously in the coming year to make sure that we support them. They've asked for web-based resources, needs assessment, and evaluation as the top 3 areas. And that makes sense. If we can help them assess their needs, provide them the resources necessary to meet them, and then help them understand how to evaluate that work, we'll be doing our job. We also ask who gets your report every year, and 88% said their superintendent gets the report, 70% their local board of ed. The 2 numbers we would love to see go up is the community and the public and the local board of health, because it's so important for LEAs in it to be working with their community agencies. I said I would mention nutrition services a little bit later on. We have a whole section, and it's in your larger document, of local wellness policy highlights. Those numbers have stayed at 95% for each of those areas. A lot of that has to do with the fact that our LEAs are required to meet those requirements in order to stay part of the school lunch program, the National School Lunch Program. But I think what's more important to highlight again about local wellness policies and school nutrition on this particular day is the work of all of our Dr. Harvey and her team and the school staff throughout the state who have done such a great job to make sure that no students were without food during this particular time. Each year we also bring you success stories. Those are the words from the success stories we received from our LEAs this time. And we usually divide those according to your state board regions. And you'll see those regions in the next slide, obviously. But this year we decided to look at some themes because there were quite a few themes across the different regions. And those themes included several things on the next slide. Nutrition, obviously, there was a lot of great work done to make sure that students ate. Internet access was a success that many of our LEAs talked about. We're incredibly excited to see that more and more of our LEAs are beginning to use telemedicine to address some of the mental health needs of their students. And several of them wrote about that and talked about that as a success. Several mentioned community partnerships, again, so important during this time. Several mentioned school safety, both physical safety, mental and emotional well-being. And then quite a few of our LEAs are addressing vaping. There's been a lot of good resources that have come out from the Division of Public Health to address vaping. So rather than bringing folks here, we noticed when we were reading success stories that there were a few quotes that really stuck out to us. Some people took some time to write, and I'm going to read these as some people may be listening by phone. The first is from April Marr, and she's the Director of Student Services in Wilkes County. And she says, "We have been able to use COVID-19 to emphasize and deepen understanding of the impact of trauma on learning, the necessity of becoming more trauma-informed in our policies and practices, and integrating more social emotional learning opportunities for students and staff. Self-care has also had a renewed and ongoing focus in our district as we have all struggled to cope with the pandemic and how it has changed every aspect of how we teach and learn together. There's also far greater understanding of the roles of student instructional support personnel and how essential those staff members are to our schools." And April in Wilkes County is they are one of our whole school, whole community child pilots as well. The next person is Sarah Exum from Terrell County Schools. She says, "Our school district, though small, is mighty. I feel that we have worked together to provide for our students. From day one, we have hit the ground running with meals and packets last spring. This fall, our teachers have gone above and beyond to make sure they're providing quality education. Our administration and student services teams have been working diligently to meet the needs of our students, families, and coworkers. We are a family and have bonded together to make sure that everyone is safe, physically and emotionally. The next person we heard from was Wendy Jordan. She's the Director of Student Services in Richmond County. She said, our biggest source of pride from 2019-2020 is the relationship building with community stakeholders and shining the light on the fact that we all have the same challenges. We all serve the same families. Therefore, our work is so connected. We are so fortunate to have very rich relationships across agencies, and this only benefits our students and families. And then finally, from Debbie Bryant, who's the Healthful Living Coordinator in Buncombe County Schools. She says, it became evident that we needed to focus on the whole child during remote learning. Parents, teachers, and students recognized the need to rely on each other for not only physical health, but mental and emotional health as well. So again, those are the types of successes. It was really great to hear about the work of our LEAs during this, especially during this time of COVID. And we did ask them a specific question about COVID that's not usually on our survey to get an idea of what was going on with them this time. And our next slide, it wouldn't be talking about physical activity if we didn't ask you to move just a little bit. If you will, if you'll take your hands and I can't see if you're doing it, so you could be just laughing at me right now, but if you'll take your hands and put them at your shoulders, like you're gonna raise the roof and just count out 10 reps. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Got it. And let's do the same thing with punching. If you look there, you can stand up, you can sit down, you can grab something heavy. We're going to punch out for 10, just punching into the air. So if you're mad at somebody, here's your chance. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Punch it hard. Thank you for, and I hope you'll use those later if you have the opportunity, because we do sit quite a bit these days. So in your October meeting, you suggested that you all talked about increasing the reach for YRBS and oversampling more of our LEAs. And just a reminder that the YRBS Youth Risk Behavior Survey is a survey from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The next slide shows the priority health behaviors that are measured. If you'll remember, we added some new questions to try to get more information around equity and school safety as well. And this is an opportunity for us to get a voice from our students and hear their voice. So a few things have happened. The Youth Risk Behavior Survey, you can move to the next slide, this year has moved from a spring, the 2021 survey has moved from a spring administration for the national YRBS to a fall administration due to COVID. And we felt like it would be a great idea for us as well to follow the national example and move our survey from what would normally have been January 2021 to August, September, October 2021. By doing that, it also means that we have the time, if the board would like, to oversample more districts. So currently, what we do, and we met with the CDC and they helped us look at what they could do for us at this point in time to support our work. We currently have a statewide sample, and I report on that data to you each time we have it, every other odd number year. We oversample 20 LEAs. They're receiving district level data. And up until now, we've done a paper and pencil survey, and you can see Les with all his surveys as we're getting ready to ship them to the data analysis team. Next year, what we're hoping to do in the 2021 survey, and after talking with our partners at the CDC, they're still willing to support us in that 20 LEA
Ellen, Dr. Essex, you're going in and out.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Dr. Essex, you're going in and out. I think you're having a connection. Oh, well, board members, and Chair Keenan, as we round it out, Dr. Essex would round it out with, she is proposing some proposed changes to the Healthy Active Children Policy, which is Section 8, that we will bring back to the board at your meeting in January for additional consideration once we do some work with that policy, with legal and with others.
Okay.
And that will conclude that presentation.
All right, Mr. Chair, that concludes our presentation from HRS Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. We'll now move to our final committee of the day, the Student Learning and Achievement Committee, and I'll turn to the chair of that committee, Ms. Camden.
Thank you, Chair Davis. I have the pleasure of sharing leadership of this committee with Dr. Olivia Oxendine. And together we have actually for us a fairly short agenda today. First, I'll start with new business, computer science initiative update from Dr. Hemphill.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chairman Davis and esteemed members of the board, Superintendent Johnson, Superintendent-elect Truitt. I'm Dr. Mary Hemphill Joseph, and it is with great pleasure that I'm bringing you updates from the K-12 Computer Science Initiative. It is truly hard to believe that we started this work in the department here with computer science in April of 2019. And now, less than 2 years later, we have achieved our goal of adopting the first set of K-12 computer science standards for our state, as well as set the foundation for a coordinated statewide pathway from kindergarten to career. One of the things that has been instrumental is that over the past year and a half, we have addressed equity gaps through our #IMCS campaign, leveraged successful professional development programs that have been teacher and school leader led, as well as encouraged cross-sector partnerships across North Carolina. The purpose of today's presentation is to bring an update to the State Board of Education on the installation of the K-12 computer science standards. And one of the things that has been critical is that in light of the unprecedented times we are facing, I could not be more proud of the momentum we have garnered due to our passionate teacher leaders, school leaders, and district leaders in our state around this work. This installation year is critical to ensuring that we are communicating consistently with the field to determine how the standards are impacting teaching and learning across K-12. One of the things that I always tell our writing and review teams, our external stakeholders, and some of our teacher leads who have been instrumental in this work is that computer science is one academic discipline that requires learners and leaders to operate in a state of perpetual beta. By that, I mean that computer science is a field that is constantly changing and evolving. So the key takeaways and celebrations and challenges that our field has helped our field determine next steps has been instrumental, because we have identified specific needs across the grade bands throughout the past couple of months, as well as leverage support at the statewide level for critical next steps. And with each of the instructional supports that are being developed during this installation year, we've utilized that feedback from the field as our temperature check to make sure that we are providing and developing supports that positively impact learning for students and teachers and leaders. And we are going to continue to do that work. The focus areas for efficient, effective, and sustainable implementation are defined as the specific set of activities that are designed to put into practice any activity or program from known dimensions. Now, from these 4 focus areas in regards to professional development, this installation year has been critical because we have worked and are working right now to not only develop computer science PD that is grade band specific and matches the standards themselves, but also region specific to speak to the needs and realities and teachers in their CS ecosystem. You have heard me say many times that the realities around computer science within each of our regions across our state are vastly different. So we are so fortunate to talk with external stakeholders as well as teachers who are right now on the ground implementing these standards and are going to be elevating some of the best practices that they have found over the past couple of months, virtually as well as hybrid and face-to-face with our computer science initiatives for the start of next year. Our teacher leaders have asked for tangible exemplars and lessons that demonstrate how the standards can be integrated into the core content. And this has been critical, particularly at the K2 level, where our teachers specifically asked that we help our students grapple with computational thinking, data and algorithms, and impacts of computing, because our students in K-2 are many times experiencing computer science for the first time in their educational career. Some of the celebrations we've had just since August is that we have launched the North Carolina Standard Course of Study Computer Science website in November. We are one of the newest academic disciplines, so we're happy to have that space carved out on the DPI site where our standards will live, as well as the instructional supports that we are creating. We are so excited to announce, as well as we have completed the CS Standards Glossary. This is a truly interactive glossary component that it really takes all of the standards, breaks them down not only by grade band, but also by grade level, and gives our teachers and students comparable and comprehensive terms and definitions for each of the terms that are used within the CS standards. We are also excited to announce that by the end of this month, we will have completed the CSTA crosswalk. So if you will remember that our standards that we created for North Carolina were developed from the national set of CSTA standards. And so we will have a crosswalk for those to be able to guide our teacher leaders and student leaders doing this work in terms of what is happening nationally. And then it walks it right to the state specific standards. And then we also have, in collaboration with our #IMCS initiative, our ambassadors, 8 teacher leaders across our state got together and since May have been working to develop a Google site. So this is a site that is developed by teachers for teachers. And we're working right now on the last permissions to be able to upload that site to our DPI site and marry that with our CS official DPI portal. And it includes professional development opportunities across our state, exemplar lessons, as well as terminologies and opportunities for students where the #IMCS campaign and initiative live. So I couldn't be more proud of our teacher leaders who have put that together. Next week is the official and national CS Coding Week for not only the entire country, but also the Hour of Code by Code.org. And if you will remember, last year we had a fun activity. And so I'm so sad that virtually we cannot do that. However, we are excited to announce that we are going to be garnering support for this across our state. Right now, over 1 billion students have been impacted over the past 5 years and in over 180 plus countries by the Hour of Code. So we're very excited. We already have North Carolina teachers and schools and districts that are signing up for next week to be able to implement 1 hour of code. This is truly one of the most simple and most effective ways to introduce coding to students. And again, code.org has been instrumental in helping us not only with CS fundamentals, CS discoveries, CS principles, but also helping us find free ways to be able to engage our students in the power of coding and robotics across our state. So be on the lookout next week for that, as many of our students and teachers have already signed up. It has been so amazing to watch the mobilization of CS stakeholders across our regions. And so we would be remiss if we did not recognize the multiple efforts and strategic entities who are working consistently to continue supporting our students and schools with these standards. We know that our teachers and students are learning and leading in unprecedented times. And so I have been so amazed at all of the different entities that have been elevated who have truly support not only this work, but also have kept the momentum going since our standards have been adopted. And you will see here on this next slide that we have many of those stakeholders listed here, not only from CSTA, but also ESEP, who just hosted a statewide summit on last month. We had over 90 participants to that summit from across the state, teacher leaders, district leaders, external stakeholders who came together and truly created foundational and longitudinal data points for what the standards will look like K through 12. We also are grateful for the Friday Institute, who are helping us with these crosswalks, and their partnership with them has been instrumental. Code.org, as well as hashtag CS4NC. Today, it is my pleasure to elevate the Duke Innovation and Entrepreneurship Program, CS by Us. This is an educational research and development project at Duke University, and their sole mission is to help realize racial and gender equity in K-12 computer science and tech ed across North Carolina and beyond. Last year, I had the pleasure of presenting to their cohort of students, and I was able to engage with students at Duke University about questions and ideas that they had around computer science and innovation in our state. And upon hearing their mission, I immediately recognized the need for equity-focused, human-centered design in the computer science standards installation. So one of the things that we have done is created authentic portals of learning for North Carolina students by students in higher education in this field. And one thing that it has really helped us see is that there is a clear and tangible pathway to computer science from kindergarten to career. So I am so proud to announce that this was one of the first initiatives where we have students in higher ed in North Carolina creating programming and developing for students in North Carolina. And here to talk about the incredible work that they've done at EK Poe Elementary in Durham, North Carolina, we have Dr. Aria Shernick, who is the faculty lead for CS by Us, an associate professor of practice at social science at Duke University. We have Jay Patel, who is a curriculum lead for CS by Us, and he is an incoming software engineer at Microsoft. We have Carter Zinke, who is the research lead for CS by Us at Duke University, and he is an EDM candidate at Harvard University. Chelsea Williams, who is the AIG facilitator at EK Poe Elementary School. And last but not least, so excited to have Cindy Ginsberg, who is a fourth grader at EK Poe Elementary, who is going to talk about their work in this project. And I will turn it over to Dr. Schmidt.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hemphill, and thank you to the members of the board for giving us this opportunity to share our work with you. We are so enthusiastic about this work, which seeks to make learning computer science and technology education relevant and engaging for all students, and to advance racial and gender equity in our schools and communities. CS by Us is an education research and development project at Duke University. We combine rigorous academic research with computer science subject matter expertise and a passionate community of Duke undergraduate and graduate students, faculty, and regional partners. We center educational equity by working open. Our work is driven by the principles of active inclusivity, transparency, and collaboration. These principles guide both our products, the educational resources and professional learning opportunities we create, and our process. And that process is called open design. Open design is a variation of design thinking that engages the primary stakeholders, in this case, students, teachers, and families, as co-creators, not just users. Co-creation is a critical approach if we want to engage students who are traditionally underrepresented in CS and technology education in schools, and CS and technology careers in the workforce. You are likely familiar with the abysmal statistics surrounding underrepresentation in computer science. Statistics like, despite the fact that 25% of students identify as Black, only 9% of students taking AP computer science exams identify as Black. And like, despite the fact that approximately half of all students are female, only 28% of students taking AP computer science exams identify as female. We need resources and pedagogies that spark passion and curiosity in students of all identities. We know from academic research and our lived experiences that culturally relevant and project-based pedagogies increase engagement by underrepresented learners. That's why our resources foreground these pedagogies, just as equity-focused open design foregrounds our research and development. We are proud to say that this combination of equity-centered pedagogy and equity-centered co-design has deeply resonated with students and teachers alike. In only 2 years, CS by Us has been in after-school programs, partnered with nonprofit educational organizations, and run day-long programming for K-12 students on Duke's campus. But we see the most promise for transformative work to be in-school adoption. We had the privilege of partnering with Dr. Hempel and EK Poe Elementary School in Durham last winter to develop our first in-school pilot, and it was a wonderful success. And we are very proud to share a bit about that with you now.
Yeah, so as Dr. Chernick was talking about, this past spring, 4 teachers in grades 3 through 5 at EK Poe Elementary taught CS standards aligned lessons from CS by Us's curricula, now known as Algorithms Are Everywhere, which ties basic CS concepts such as algorithms and conditionals with real-world examples and even other subjects, including literature, decisions using data, which encourages students to think critically about how they can utilize data to make decisions or predictions, secure connections, which guides students through safe online practices they can use to protect their own information. And finally, We Can Make Apps Too, where students discuss problems in their community or in the world at large and collaborate to design a simple mobile app to help solve or raise awareness of some real-world problem. All of these curricula are tech optional, meaning while there are additional supplemental lesson plans that require computers or tablets, you don't need computers to complete the base curricula and learn all of the concepts. We designed our curricula this way to maximize accessibility to all students in North Carolina. In short, our lesson plans are student-centered and connected with the real world, with the hope of fostering an interest in CS, while also imparting the computational thinking fundamentals that will help students continue to learn CS as they progress through middle and high school. We wanted to show off a couple examples of our lesson plans, so here's the cover page from a lesson plan from the Algorithms Are Everywhere curriculum. All of our lesson plans have a cover page like this that clearly outlines the activities done, standards covered, and materials needed for each lesson. That is then followed by easy-to-read paragraphs detailing each activity to help the teacher understand and execute the lesson plan. In this lesson, for example, students began learning what algorithms are by collaborating to design their first algorithm, a set of step-by-step instructions for how the teacher can tie their shoe. We simplify an unfamiliar word into something students can understand, and then have them see the importance of being very clear and deliberate while creating the steps with their instructions, or algorithm, and giving them the chance to debug their algorithm when it doesn't work and to try again. So that lesson plan serves as a good exemplar of the curricula we developed for EK Poe. However, it was not created with remote learning in mind, which we all know is unfortunately the norm right now. So while we were able to adapt some of our existing curricula to be more remote friendly, we found it would be very beneficial to develop new remote focused curricula. We Can Make Games Too utilizes MIT's Scratch platform to teach concepts such as algorithms, loops, conditionals, and objects, while students are building their own game that they will then adapt to address a real-world problem. In addition, we created a new decisions using data curriculum with more remote-friendly activities. Here's an example of a lesson plan from We Can Make Games Too. Over the first several lessons, students will be creating an example game that we've provided to the teacher. In this lesson in particular, their goal is to create the objects they need for that game, meaning the characters that will later interact with each other. These lessons were created with a project-based learning mindset, as you can see by us having the students explore Scratch on their own first, to see if they can figure out how to add and configure their desired objects, before scaffolding in a lesson that then explains what objects in CS are by comparing and contrasting them with objects in real life, and also having students discuss what they learned or struggled with while exploring on their own before providing a demonstration of using objects in Scratch.
We've talked about how CS by S uses a co-design process to create lessons like the one that Jay just shared. But what does this look like in schools? For us, co-design is a back and forth process between implementing curriculum in schools with teachers and redesigning it with the resources of a university. In weekly cycles, we lead reflections that prompt teachers to think about student engagement, student learning, and how seamlessly they can implement the lessons. Based on that reflection process, our curriculum co-design team works to improve the lessons in real time. At the end of those 8 weeks, we have a rich source of data to evaluate our entire design process. Let's look first at student engagement from our most recent pilot. Our results were highly promising. On the left, you'll see that teachers frequently reported their students were more engaged in CS by S lessons than other lessons during the day. On the right, you'll see that teachers found the lessons supported students' understanding of North Carolina's computer science standards. Teachers themselves found the lessons manageable and almost seamless to use. They reported that the workload of most lesson plans was not too high, and in cases that they were too high, our co-design team was able to improve those lesson plans based on that feedback. Further, teachers indicated that they felt strongly confident in their ability to teach lesson plans well. Although we still think computer science, PD, is a high priority, this data might indicate the potential for these lessons to be used by a wide range of teachers with varying skill backgrounds. And to provide more context for this data, one of our teacher co-designers is here to share their experience.
Good afternoon. Last year, I was given the opportunity to pilot the CS by S curriculum in my third grade classroom. When I was first approached by the team, I didn't know much about computer science. I thought it was something that students needed in high school if they intended to go into engineering, robotics, or other programming fields. And I didn't make the connection that computational thinking and critical thinking really go hand in hand. Many classroom teachers have incredibly tight schedules. Fit in additional activities and programs can be challenging. Initially, I opted to teach 2 25-minute standalone lessons, but I quickly realized that these lessons could be incorporated into my current content areas. I began using the CS by S lessons as a way to help my students build background knowledge on the standards I was already teaching. For example, in the algorithm lesson they were speaking of earlier, this was an excellent way to get my kids to understand the concepts of standard algorithm for addition and subtraction with math. My students discovered that an algorithm is just a set of steps, and they started to see how algorithms presented themselves all around them. One student even shared with me that I should change the word directions to algorithms to complete an activity because that's all it really was. The unplugged lessons allowed my students to use their creativity while thinking computationally. They were given the opportunity to get up out of their seats, move around the room, make observations, and collaborate with their peers. My kids really look forward to these activities weekly, and it was even a way for us to stay connected once the pandemic began. When we were in school, I intentionally placed kids in mixed ability groups so that they could all and share their ideas. I found these lessons to be accessible to all students, and they required little modification on my end. During the lessons, my kids' rich dialogue was evidence that their critical thinking skills were really being fostered. Ultimately, we were able to make connections between what we were doing in the classroom and possible career fields and the local universities that offered programs in the fields they were interested in. We partnered with my youngest brother, who's a software engineer for Progressive in Cleveland, Ohio, and he was able to show my kids real-world applications of what they were learning in class with me. When the pandemic hit and schools closed down, it was an adjustment for everyone. My students asked if we could still continue our computer science lesson, and it turned into a weekly course where students explored coding. Many of my students still have fond memories of these activities, and one has asked to share her experiences with you. As Dr. Hempfield said, Sydney's currently a 4th grader at EK Poe Elementary School, and she's going to share with you her thoughts on the CS by S curriculum.
My name is Sydney Ginsburg, and my very best friend's name is Sabby. When I told her about what I was doing today, her first question was, "What is computer science?" In the beginning, I thought I would just be looking at computers, but that was not the case. I thought that it was just for kids who are really good at technology, but actually everyone could do it. I thought that there would be more numbers and things I didn't understand, like coding, but it was really designing our own thing. My favorite lesson was the getting to make your own app. I got to make an app that allowed people to access websites when they didn't have internet. Some of my friends made apps that helped cars fly out of traffic and detect pickpockets nearby. I liked it because I didn't need a computer. We were on paper and really doing art, but it was like computer science. I really liked that we got to be creative and think about what we wanted on our app. I liked the lessons because they were not just about one subject. There was some math and some reading in every activity. I felt hurt because everyone got a chance to share their ideas, and we worked in teams and small groups and got to solve problems. Everyone was doing it all together, and everyone was sharing their ideas. When we did work by ourselves, we were still together because we could share ideas and help each other. I want kids to know that taking these lessons, even if it is hard sometimes, you have to keep trying and you will get it. When COVID hit and we couldn't finish coding in school, it was something that even over Zoom, I felt COVID couldn't affect, and it didn't.
Now, as we continue this work, we want to be co-designing tools and activities that can help assess the ways students like Sydney enter into computer science. And as Sydney was saying, computer science is fundamentally a creative endeavor, best done in community. We think that understanding this creative process will require new assessments that highlight a student's learning process and not only their outcomes.
So our research and development approach engages teachers, students, and families as co-creators. Our location at Duke University means that we have access to state-of-the-art program assessment methodologies and protocols. And our commitment to equity runs through our curricula, professional learning opportunities, and our research and development process. So what's our vision for the future? Certainly, we hope that North Carolina will adopt our pilot curriculum across the state for in-school use in grades 3 through 5. But we also hope to extend our pilot partnership with DPI to include schools from the mountains to the coast. Through this kind of partnership, we see a future where open design transforms not just curricula, but classrooms and communities, where our open education resources are helping all students flourish, and where we are co-creating remote-friendly resources for hybrid learning contexts beyond COVID. Through this kind of partnership with DPI, alongside teachers, amazing students like Sydney, and families, we see a future where education is open for all learners. Thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you so much. This was an amazing opportunity to elevate what is possible when we put computer science and learning in the hands of our students. even during these unprecedented times. And I just want to thank this entire team, particularly Sydney, for elevating her experiences. And as we wrap up, I would be remiss if I did not really recognize the collaboration that is happening to create these opportunities, not only from our CTE department, advanced learning, our state and computer curriculum and instruction department. And I also want to be very thankful for Howard Ginsberg, who was instrumental from the STEM department in helping us get these last instructional supports together. So thank you all. Thank you so much, Chairman Davis. And I will now open it up for questions for our team.
We'll take, as we all know, the fire has really wreaked havoc with our schedule here this afternoon. So if there are a couple of burning questions out there, we will take a minute to do that. Anyone have a question for the folks from Duke or Ms. Williams or Sydney or Dr. Hemphill? Hearing none, I'll just say that I wish I had a magic wand and that we could just expand that program at Poe Elementary to across this state tomorrow. I don't know about anybody else, but I would love to pop in for a visit in the new year just to see what's going on there. So thank you all so much. This is such an exciting, it's such an exciting program.
Thank you so much, Ms. Emmett.
Moving on to our action item today, SLA 1. This is the JLOC report on broadening access and successful participation in advanced courses. We heard a presentation from Ms. Shaw Coltrane and Ms. Cross last month. I don't believe there's been any major change to the actual report, but we do have a visit from the College Board to talk to us about the North Carolina AP partnership. So Ms. Shaw Coltrane or Ms. Cross, are you going to introduce our guests?
I am, Ms. Kamnitz. Thank you so much. So last month, we did share with you the report to broaden access and successful participation for advanced coursework, which will be up for your action tomorrow. We were able to share the overall efforts of our North Carolina public schools and all the hard work that they are doing to increase equity and excellence in our state when it comes to the high school aspect. And as you remember from last month, we've had some incredible long-term results. And today we have with us one of our just incredibly supportive partners in this work. We have Kathleen Cook with us. She is the Senior Director for the AP Partnership. If you recall, the legislation actually funds the North Carolina AP Partnership to do incredible work. And so today, Kathleen is with us from the College Board to go further into their efforts in particular with this initiative. Kathleen, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sneha. Good afternoon, Chairman Davis, Vice Chairman Duncan, board members and stakeholders. Thank you for hanging in there this late in the afternoon. We always appreciate this opportunity to share the results of our state's public school students who took on the challenge of advanced placement for this past school year. As Ms. Shaw Coltrane just shared with you last month, our teachers and students have much to be proud of, and it's my honor to celebrate them with you today. So I'll just kick off this presentation with a very quick visual journey through what amounted to be a very unusual school year for us in the College Board, not only because of the pandemic, but because the start of the 2019-20 school year marked a giant leap forward for advanced placement as we implemented a whole new suite of free online virtual supports for our AP community. And these supports were a real paradigm shift for us at the College Board. For 65 years previously, AP had been taught with lots of content given to teachers, but to be honest, very few resources. And so teachers really had to work hard to develop their own resources to teach all that content. They had some released exams, but they didn't really have much to work with. And 2019 really brought to us a whole new level of teaching resources for our teachers. So in every AP subject, all 38 of them across the board, Teachers were given new course and exam descriptions, which laid out not only the course content more specifically, but also the skills that students needed to develop to go along with that content. And so the sequencing and pacing suggestions really were pivotal in helping our teachers to sort of see behind the curtain and understand what's really drill down and focus on. A new digital platform was introduced, which includes topic questions, progress checks, these formative assessment tools to really help our students check their understanding and for our teachers to see where their students were in a more formative nature as they progress throughout the year, and to get immediate feedback so our students can really see how they're doing and teachers can catch any misconceptions. So the final piece of this were AP daily videos that have been introduced for every course topic, which are a series of on-demand short videos that teachers can assign to students and thus save class time for focused discussion and collaboration. So all of these resources really allowed for a more focused approach to teaching AP, and obviously demanded that we develop a state plan to make sure that all of our teachers across the state were not only aware of these resources, but knew how to use them well. So you see pictured here some of the groups that we met with throughout the fall of 2019. Our team of 3 here in the state set out to just touch as many stakeholders as we could. We did PD in large groups, in small groups. We practiced using tools one-on-one with teachers. We met with PLCs. We collaborated with groups about how to best use them for their specific content areas. And we're feeling really good about how things were going. We did both small and large group trainings. We did classroom walkthroughs. You can see Michelle pictured there doing a walkthrough in a physics class. It makes me chuckle every time I look at that picture. One-on-one trainings, all of these things really in an attempt to just make sure that our teachers understood the new tools and were engaging with them in the best way that they could. And then, of course, the spring came. And with the pandemic, we really had to sort of do a reset and change how we approached our work in the North Carolina AP partnership. So we quickly realized that we had to pivot a bit. We transitioned all of our meetings to virtual meetings and training. We knew that AP was really well positioned to support schools, whether they were teaching in person, online, or a combination of both, using hybrid models. And so the flexibility of these online resources were really essential to support instruction as schools began to close, and ultimately became a lifeline for many in our AP community. In the partnership, we worked very closely with DPI to quickly transfer funds from canceled face-to-face spring gatherings to virtual supports and trainings. And I'm pleased to report that since March, our NCAP team of 3 has delivered 52 virtual webinars and trainings, reaching over 700 teachers, administrators, and students. And we reappropriated funds to send a record-setting number of teachers to virtual AP Summer Institutes, delivering over 630 scholarships this year. And what we learned during this transition is that our AP community is stronger than ever. Our teachers are incredibly committed to the success of their students, regardless of the chaos they might find themselves in. And our focus with teachers really became what instructional decisions will be best for your current reality, whatever it is, and how can you best leverage AP Classroom to promote student learning. So that became sort of really our driving agenda as we move through the spring and into the fall. And our teachers really rose to the challenge. So I'm sorry that there's some fine print here, but essentially what this slide is giving you is a synopsis of AP Classroom use in the 2019-20 school year, and it was really remarkable. In North Carolina alone, over 62,000 or 69% of our students completed over 10 million practice questions in the AP Classroom platform. Again, that allowed them to get immediate feedback and to catch any misconceptions as they learn the material. And even more encouraging, I think, was that this use was spread remarkably evenly across ethnic groups. So whether we looked at Black, Hispanic, American Indian, whatever group of students, it seemed to be very even. And as far as geography, rural, urban, suburban schools, very even spread of use. So that was encouraging to us. And really, how amazing that during a global pandemic, with schools closed and AP exams delivered online for the first time ever, our students really stepped up to the plate and they seized on the opportunity to show what they had learned and earn college credit. So I know you're aware, the College Board took the unprecedented step of delivering online exams that students could take from home. We worked to support students with hotspots and in some cases with laptops. And in the end, our total number of examinees was down in North Carolina, 5.3% as compared to last year. But I will tell you that that is remarkable that it didn't drop further. And given the national numbers, it was very high. And also, you know, what we're really encouraged about is that there was, our performance remained virtually the same. So there was a larger percentage than ever of our students receiving qualifying scores, which means a 3, 4, or 5 on their exam to earn college credit. So that is all pretty amazing to us. This commitment to take rigorous, of course, exams in May by millions of AP students across the nation facing so much uncertainty really blew us away. And part of this large exam registration was due to a no-risk option. We encouraged schools to just register students. We said if exams, you know, there won't be, and there's no risk. We're not going to charge any fees for canceled exams or students who change their mind at the last minute. It will be the same this year because we find ourselves in a similar position. So regardless of whether schools are online, face-to-face, the College Board will work with them to make sure that students can test. Know that the 2021 exams will match the traditional published exam descriptions that I spoke of earlier, because colleges expect the AP exam to cover the full spectrum of the corresponding course. But we certainly will support in-school testing in 2021 if that is possible, if schools are open and schools are able to do that. We know that that delivers more equity and access to students. But of course, if schools are closed because of safety concerns, we will share a contingency plan. And any schools that need to socially distance in May 2021, we will have a plan for that as well. So we remain flexible, and hopefully we will have results this coming year as positive as this past year. So if we look over I'm sorry, Dr. Townsend, can you stay on that previous slide? Yeah, thank you. So as we look over the trajectory of the last 5 years, here's our numbers. What you'll see is that decrease in the number of test takers of 5.3%, which means that in total, over 70,000 North Carolina public school students took 127,268 AP exams this past May, with 73,701 of those exams receiving a proficient score. So this represents a 6.2% decrease of exams taken because some students take more than one exam, and a 0.3% decrease of exams attaining a 3+ score over last year, which again, we find pretty encouraging given the situation we were all in. As we dig even further into that data, we see that AP participation and performance for both Black and Hispanic students in North Carolina outpaced the nation by far. So Black students did see a decrease in participation of 6.2%, but this was much, much lower than the national decrease of 17.1%. And we saw a similar trend with Hispanic students, where participation decreased in North Carolina 4.4%, but the nation's Hispanic students decreased 14.2%. So all in, our performance numbers are what are really remarkable, because if we look at our Black and Hispanic students as a subgroup, we see that our Black students saw a gain in performance of 7.2%, and our Hispanic students saw an increase of 4% over last year. So that's what's circled in red on this slide. And if you look across the years, you'll see those numbers tick up over the past 5 years. And so it's just remarkable to us that we had more Black and Hispanic students than ever before receive qualifying scores during this global pandemic when students were testing from home. So really pretty remarkable, and I think something that we should celebrate. And that it's increased gradually over time means that we're closing that gap that we set out to at the beginning of this work back in 2014. So very encouraging. And the good news wasn't limited to just those groups. We also saw just incredible gains for American Indian students, where participation grew 37.5%, with performance really growing a whopping 96%. Certainly, this is remarkable. I think some of this growth can be attributed to classrooms that came online, new sections offered at schools, and also, of course, the use of AP Classroom that really helped teachers to focus on their instruction and what mattered most. I will say a word in regards to AP Computer Science Principles, which is our newest course, which began in 2017. We have seen remarkable growth in North Carolina. And so, again, we saw another remarkable year. This course, when it began in North Carolina, we had about 816 students test the first year. So this is AP Computer Science Principles. We also have a second AP Computer Science class called AP Computer Science A, but this is just Computer Science Principles. And of that first cohort of 816 students, 623 earned qualifying scores. Well, this year, just 3 years later, those numbers have grown to 3,622 students testing, with 2,360 earning qualifying scores. So that is really phenomenal growth. We're very proud of this work in the 198 schools in 48 districts across North Carolina that offer this course. We continue to work with our schools to grow this course and others, but I'm really encouraged about this. So that's a lot of data. I've kind of done this big data dump with you all, but I just want to stress that for our team, each of those numbers represents a student, a school that we work closely with. And as a team, we're just really proud of our schools and all of the hard work they did over this past year. But we are never done and never pleased, and it's never over. So we continue to strive for continual gains. And as you know, the partnership has a particular group of districts that we target. These are more rural districts who we do some additional PD with to really move their programs forward. There are 21 of these districts who we worked with most closely in 2019-20 listed here. I'm going to show you those additional PD offerings that they have in just a moment. We are particularly proud of this group of districts this year because their gains were just remarkable. Their exam takers increased by 7.4%. They increased the number of exams they took by 2.9%. But what's really remarkable is the number of qualifying scores increased 20%. And we really attribute this to the focused, very intentional work we did with teachers over the past year to use AP Classroom to really help their students reflect on their learning, to pivot where they needed to really drill down in areas that maybe they weren't spending enough time with in the past. And we really see it paying off on the exam results. So we're very pleased with that. But as I said, we're never done. We're never satisfied. We'll continue to listen and collaborate with our target districts as we partnership forward. I think our team is particularly proud of the fact that our message of equity and access is truly penetrating, and we see that reflected in our feedback. We do post-event surveys. We have a third-party evaluator who does those for us. And as you can read here, these are some of the feedbacks, quotes we've received over the past. And these are from administrators. And I'm going to just read the middle one here because I think it's particularly meaningful for those who might be listening. I quote, "We have lots of individual support for teachers. They, the NCAP staff, help us with tracking student data. Our teachers can see the data trends. The PD is very beneficial. The APSI scholarships, the middle school colloquium, and the district leadership training. We have scheduled meetings for AP teachers to look at a few things. Jerry will come to our principal roundtables and asks, what is a typical AP student? He helps us understand how we can build the AP program. He talks about identifying the student with grit, those who can benefit from taking an AP course. Staff from NCAP held an AP Academy and many teachers attended. Then we had a roadshow for parents and students at every high school in the district to explain the benefits of taking AP courses. We held meetings with middle school administrators to explain their role building a successful AP program. And this year we will start having conversations with elementary school administrators." I love that quote because I think it really helps you to have insight into the fact that we truly try to be very flexible. We meet districts where they're at and let them help design their plan for how they're going to grow their program. In this particular district that this quote comes from, they really were drilling down at all levels, doing that vertical articulation that we work with our districts on to really expose students to rigor early, to allow all students that opportunity, and to really encourage students from all walks to the table, as we say, to experience AP for things they're passionate about. And we work outside of our target districts as well. So here is feedback from a district. We'll work with any district across the state that reaches out to us. And so this is feedback from our great partner in Alamance Burlington School, Johnson, who is their chief secondary officer, who said their exceptional growth in AP this year. She was very kind, and she attributed some of that growth to our partnership. So I just like to read her words to you. She said, Helen Keller once said, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. The North Carolina AP partnership has definitely been our together. The professional development tailored to the needs of our staff, the resources provided by the partnership, or guidance to evidence-based resources that can support our work, and the thought partnering that goes on late in the evenings and weekends from the partnership team is the reason we saw an 18% gain in the number of students scoring a 3 or higher on AP exams. Our plan of intentionality and no barriers was carried out thanks to the North Carolina partnership. So those words just mean a great deal to us. We're very grateful for wonderful colleagues like Ravon Miss Johnson, who work so hard to move their programs forward. And so as we look to the current year, we'll continue to be flexible and responsive to the needs of our districts in whatever reality we find ourselves. As you can see, several of our events have already taken place virtually this fall, and we will continue to move things to virtual delivery as need be. I can tell you that we had an event this fall where 125 teachers attended, and we had 7 breakout rooms over 2 days. And that was a new experience for me and my team. And I'm very pleased to say that it didn't flop. It actually worked, and it went off without a hitch. And we had very good reviews. So this has been a great learning time, I think, for many of us as we learn to do work remotely. Thanks. The next slide. And I will just say, you know, last year when I talked to you all, I talked about us listening to, and we really are looking forward to getting back to business as usual, because one of the things that our districts had asked for when we did needs assessment was time and space to really think and plan deeply. And so last year we had what we thought would be our first annual retreat. We'll see if we get to have one this year, but we were lucky enough to spend some time over a weekend with teams from partnership districts who came together and really thought deeply and developed their own plans around equity and access. And I think it's this type of commitment and intentional focus that makes this partnership so powerful. And we will continue to listen to our district partners as they tell us what they need and how we can best support them to reach their goals. And we will continue to advocate for our students, and hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to have more events like our AP Day at the Capitol in 2018. And we will continue to share the good news of our schools and our teachers and students' efforts at our website, ncappartnership.org, and through our Twitter account and newsletters. We hope you'll consider following us and let us know about good stories you hear about out there so we can add them and spread the good news. But finally, you know, I'm going to wrap up and just say that we know that much work still remains, and we need not look farther than to listen to our students to find direction. So we do a national survey every year after AP exams, and I'm lucky enough to be a part of an organization that shares those survey results randomly. Every day I get an email with quotes from students, and one day a quote came through from a North Carolina student, and this is what it said. Teachers need to make sure to explain the course layout. Many students at my school also sign up to take AP courses, not even knowing the critical logistics of each course. This problem of a severe lack of knowledge about the course and College Board's resources needs to be addressed by emphasizing to AP teachers that students should be aware of the general course description layout before signing up for the course, and that students should know how to and why they should locate and use College Board's many resources for each course. This would perhaps bridge many of the disparities we see in scores between rural, lower income neighborhoods and wealthy urban schools. So I offer that to you as evidence that our students know best what they need. And I think that student says it very well. We know that we haven't reached every classroom. We know that work lays before us, but we feel very confident that the work is well underway. So this is our contact information. I encourage any of you to reach out anytime. And of course, at this point, I'm happy to take any questions if there's any time available to do so.
Thanks so much, Kathleen. Board members, please know that we cherish our work with the North Carolina AP Partnership here at the department. We are seeing just incredible gains with their sustained leadership and really hands-on approach to supporting our districts. And that's what we need to really make a difference and move the needle with equity and excellence. And we are doing that. And so Ms. Kamnitz, I'm not sure if we have time for any questions or not.
I am so regretful that we are at the end of a long day with this presentation because there was so much good news and so much to explore in that presentation. And we're so grateful for the support from this partnership. And as we said a month ago, we would love to be able to have the resources to expand out beyond the 21 partner districts that you all have been working with. I will just say, does anyone have a question that they absolutely feel like they need to ask while we've got the team together? Hearing not, just I don't know how I'm even without COVID, this partnership is a huge benefit to our students, but it sounds like we would have had a very difficult time navigating the end of the spring semester without the support that this partnership offered. So again, thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
All right, we will move on to our discussion item, which is SLA2, Every Student Succeeds Act update. Before I turn it over to Dr. Segal and Dr. Howard, I would like to just sort of set a little bit of stage here for what we're about to talk about. Since last March, DPI and the State Board have partnered with our schools to provide as much creativity and flexibility as possible in solving the multitude of problems related to the closing of our schools and the change to remote instruction. Certainly, the testing waivers granted by the federal and state governments last spring made a huge difference as we navigated the spring and summer. This fall, with a variety of attendance plans across the state and no waivers, it has been much more difficult to provide the flexibility needed to solve problems, particularly those related to testing and accountability. But we are focused on making the adjustments that are within our power to address the concerns we're hearing. With the approach at the end of the semester, our middle and high schools are facing the need to administer the required EOC and CTE tests under the very difficult circumstances associated with large numbers of remote learners. Counties and schools that are still operating under Plan C and families who have chosen virtual academies for their students are struggling with the need to provide a safe, in-person environment for the administration of the tests. Many questions have arisen in this regard. Waiving these assessments is not an option. They are a part of our federal ESSA plan, and we have received clear communication from the Department of Education that there will be no waivers at this time. And because we must assure the department that our test results are reliable and valid, it is not possible to administer them remotely. However, we have widened the window for administration of fall assessments to the fullest extent so that we can test students safely in small groups. This window for testing extends to June 2021. There are also requirements that we test 95% of eligible students, with serious consequences if we do not meet that benchmark. This is why it is important to test as many of our students as possible safely. Tied into the 95% requirement is a state rule that requires EOC and CTE tests to count as 20% of a student's grade. Of course, this provides meaningful feedback on a student's understanding of the course material, but it also serves to motivate our students to take the test and to take it seriously. I'd like to turn to Dr. Stegall and Dr. Howard now to further elaborate on some of these points and to present some recommendations regarding our ESSA plan. We'll hold our discussion until the completion of their presentation. Dr. Stegall and Dr. Howard.
Thank you, Ms. Chemnitz, board members, Superintendent Johnson. This is a deep discussion we've all had really since the pandemic. How do we best serve our students, and how do we do what's appropriate and continue to keep forward focusing on recovery and support. If you could slide to the next slide, please. Dr. Howard and I today are going to walk through, as you just shared, what is in our state plan for testing and accountability, what is in federal requirement, and then we're going to try to clarify how those all intertwine to one another, and then what our recommendations might be from the department. As I said, we've all been in deep, deliberate discussions for months regarding testing and accountability. Today, we strive to bring to you an update and our recommendations on potential federal waivers and state waivers. To set the context for the discussion, we want to reiterate that testing provides valuable data on what students' needs are, what they know, and how teachers can best serve individual students' needs and gaps and make sure that we're doing right by every child. Accountability is the process by which testing data is used for teacher growth, for student performance, for school performance grades, and even things such as designation of low-performing schools. You go to the next slide, please. As we discuss testing and accountability, we want to update you on the potential considerations. One is what the impact on students and parents will be. Two, the impact on educators who need to know what students know and what to do for instructional planning and support. We want to consider the impact on the use of the data for providing support and assistance, which is required by state and federal laws, and the impact on schools and communities who are contending with COVID and the responsibility to maintain health and safety. We're going to start with Dr. Howard is going to walk us through some explanations and some descriptions so we all have the same understanding of what each term means and what the requirements are. And then I'll interject here in a few moments some comments as well. So Dr. Howard.
Dr. Stegall, and good afternoon to everyone. So the first part of the discussion this afternoon is the addendum that is being allowed by the U.S. Department of Education on the Every Student Succeeds Act state plan. This is being allowed because of the testing waiver from spring 2020. There is no testing data for the 2019-20 school year. Without testing data for that school year, there's an impact on the accountability calculations and reports for this school year, the 2020-21 school year. In your board materials, there is an attachment of the actual addendum that was provided by the U.S. Department of Education, and we have indicated North Carolina's responses to that addendum that will be submitted per public comment period that will be upcoming after this meeting, consultation with the governor, and with the signature of the state superintendent and the approval of the State Board of Education would be submitted on February 1st, 2021. On the next slide, we're just summarizing, if you will, we're providing you the four major components of that addendum. And again, this is where data is missing from 2019-20, and it has an impact on the 2020-21 school year calculations. The first row really sets the tone for each one of these and clarifies that if you'll recall, the ESSA state plan, the long-term goal timeline was to end in 2026-27 school year. With no data from last school year, that end goal is being shifted or pushed back, if you will, to the 2027-28 school year. Similarly, there are consequences for growth from not having data from last school year, from the identification of new schools for improvement as part of the federal designations, and for exiting schools also through federal designations. So missing that data for 1 year has these impacts on the accountability reports for the current school year. On the last slide in this area, just to reiterate that this month is a discussion of this addendum. After public comment and consultation, we will be back in January sharing that feedback with you. And with the potential finalization of this addendum, we'll be submitting it to the U.S. Department of Education. So that concludes the part on the addendum. I think the next part we're going to shift to is talking about the fall end of course test. This slide that Dr. Stigall also shared with you, which shows the contrast between testing and accountability. This slide is repeated throughout this presentation just to remind ourselves of this relationship between the two, that there is the testing, which is very student-centered and can be taken all the way down to the student level, and then there is accountability, which is really the school level, and the differences between those two and how with one being an impact and the other one is impacted as well. So as we've already been reminded, there is not a current waiver from the U.S. Department of Education for assessments for this school year. And Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Education, sent a letter to that effect on September 3rd. And as has also been already noted, we had some extensive conversations around the possibilities for providing assessments at home for those students who are in 100% remote learning environments. But considering the impact on the validity of the assessments and recognizing that maintaining that validity is required by federal law, and then some input that we also had anecdotally from a district that noticed that in looking at their K-2 assessments, looking at students' performance in spring of 2020 to fall of 2020, the significance of some of the gains was more than reasonable for some students. All of that, coupled with conversations with other states and their position and their perspective on providing at-home administrations, led us to the conclusion that unfortunately at this time, that is not a possibility. So we are still facing, of course, the end of course testing that is upon us at this time. And of course, one of the points that come up in that conversation is about the requirement for the end of course score to comprise at least 20% of the student's final grade. So with that, I believe I'm going to pause and turn back to Dr. Stigall.
I get all the fun. Thank you. Yes. As shared, the requirement for the EOC to count at least 20% of the student's final grade for a course is an administrative rule. And the state board is obviously the formal rulemaking body and has the rulemaking process. And one of the exceptions that is being considered, I know, is if this can be emergency rule to postpone this 20%. If there is not a 20% requirement, we do know that fewer students would take the test and thus not meet the 95%. So if we waive the 25%, if the rulemaking allows it, and again, I'm not an attorney, but if the rulemaking allows it, and there are many who feel like there are rulemaking processes that could allow that, and the feds don't give us a waiver on the 95% participation rate, there could be issues. So we do know that there's been lively discussion around this 20% aspect that is in the rules. And I will say that in years past, and I'm sure we're going to discuss this further, and having been a principal and a superintendent and a curriculum director, the value in this in a typical year is the student has a vested interest, and we would like to think every student is equally engaged in all tests, regardless of circumstance. But there are occasions where students might not be as excited about taking a test, especially if it had no bearing on their grade. So the 20% not only shows a reflection of how the student did on the test, but it does reflect in part of their final grade for the course. And I think schools have seen more engagement from students with they had more responsibility to do well on that so that their grade didn't suffer. But again, given the issue that we have now with students, many students not in the building and not able to come to the building, there has been a groundswell of request and support around the possibility of changing this rule if that does exist within the rulemaking process.
And just to add some more information around the fall EOC testing, in our conversations, we have tried very much to identify some areas where we could provide as much support to our colleagues across the state as they administer these assessments. And a couple of things that we have stressed is that students who are unable to participate now in the fall testing window may take the test during a later window. There'll be a spring window or there'll be a summer window. And we also have an existing policy process, actually, that is testing outside the window. And that process has been in place for a long time, and it enables in certain situations where students cannot take the test during the window for them to then have access to the test at that time. Both of these potentially, the negative part of that, of course, is the distance time between the instruction and taking the test. That is not ideal. And of course, we all know that we are not in an ideal situation. On the next slide, we just make the issue, of course, that students have until June 30th, 2021 to take end of course test for inclusion and accountability for this school year. And then I think the rest of that information is going back to that 20% conversation that I think that we have covered at this point, unless there is something else that Dr. Stegall would like to add before we move on to the waiver discussion.
No, ma'am. As we go in the next slide with waivers, as has been mentioned, the current administration, and this is separate from the addendum process that Dr. Howard spoke of early on, which is referring to last year's results or the absence of last year's results given COVID. The current administration of the U.S. Department of Ed, as was given and discussed, submitted a letter to all the state leaders indicating that waivers would not be considered at that time. This was prior to the national election. And as you're hearing through our discussion today, and you'll hear, I guess it's the first I'll be referencing, we do recommend from the department that the state board consider applying for the waiver in the near future, given that the states have the legal authority to apply at any time. And we do know that these waivers can take as many as 120 days to receive a response. So we do want to encourage the board to consider applying for that waiver. And we'll discuss that in further detail in a moment. If you'll go to the next slide, please. All right. So what we have here, there's, we're talking about a lot of different things, 20%, 95%, accountability, testing, EOGs, EOCs, CTEs. And I know the way I feel when I go to the doctor and the physician has terms they use that I don't use in my normal vernacular. I want to make sure that we're not overusing terminology and causing any confusion. So what we hope to do with this is to help paint the picture for not only for the board and all of our interested partners and external stakeholders in our state on what each of these mean. As we just discussed, the 20% is how much of the EOC would count towards the student's actual grade on their report card, if that's in place. There are three components that federal waivers can be applied for. And if you look at this graphic, looking at the top of the graphic, you'll see that a waiver of the 95% participation rate alone, in other words, a school or district must have at least 95% of the students take the test. A waiver from that alone would still allow for accountability to happen for whatever number of students, percentage of students take it. And it would be allow for accountability to be considered and testing to continue to go on. If you look at the next block, a waiver of accountability requirements, which is again is in the second block in this graphic, would both eliminate the need for the 95% participation requirement, as well as eliminate the requirements for the accountability measures, such as, and again, when we say accountability measures, we're talking about things like school letter grades, low performing status, and so forth. And we'll talk about it in a little bit more detail in a moment. A federal waiver of accountability would also, keep in mind, require the state board to request action from the North Carolina General Assembly, given that we have state accountability requirements that are in statute. So for clarity's sake, we want to articulate what the 95% rate and the accountability requirements entail, and how waiving each, if you as a board would apply for the waiver of each, how that might impact North Carolina public schools. Next slide, please.
Okay, so the first one is the waiver from the 95% participation requirement. So if a school does not meet this requirement, the difference between 95 and the school's actual participation percent is added to the denominator in the achievement score for the school performance grades. And in the attachments to this item, there is an explanation of that. And we have also provided that explanation to our colleagues across the state, as we have had some questions recently about how that actually is done. A good example is to think of it as if you had 100 students in a school, and if 90 of them took the test, instead of doing the calculation of the percent that met the proficiency standard, instead of using 90 in the denominator, we would be forced to use 95 in the denominator. So I think we all can see how that would have a negative impact on that school achievement score and ultimately the school performance grades. And of course, with schools on various learning plans and all students not in school to take the test, there is the potential for unintended consequences. This is a federal requirement. It's not a state requirement, so it does require a waiver from the U.S. Department of Education. We will share that other states have this concern. This is not just a North Carolina concern. And in the conversations that we have with other states, they are raising this as well. If this were waived, then schools would not be penalized when they are in situations where the health of their family or the health of the students are a consideration for the student going to the school for the participation in the assessment. On the next slide, we do just clarify, though, the aspects of the waiver that have an impact potentially on all of these analyses. So if the 95% were not met, and particularly if it were significantly not met, then the impact then comes into all of these types of data analysis, school or teacher growth, identification of low performing schools for both the state and the federal requirements, identification of innovative school district and long-term goals. All of those things potentially are impacted if we do not reach that 95%. But having said that, there is also much national conversation about even if all the tests are administered or some of the tests are administered, and even if we do have accountability reports, that what is the validity of those accountability reports, knowing that we potentially are not meeting the 95%, and also just knowing the circumstances for which the assessments are being administered to students who some are in school in hybrid mode and some who are 100% remote. So everyone is agreeing nationally, I would feel comfortable saying that this is definitely an unusual year, and regardless, the data will have to be viewed through that lens. So the next slide, we consider the waiver from accountability. So as Dr. Stegall said, the 95%, that's just one piece of accountability. Asking for a waiver from accountability, that's the entire system of accountability. And again, this is because of the anticipated decrease in the number of students taking the test, and with school performance grades, with not a significant number of students taking the test, then we have the situation where the school performance grades may not reflect the entirety of a school's student population. But this is a balancing act, of course, because if we were to waive or receive a waiver from accountability from the U.S. Department of Education, and while we can see most definitely that it would be a concern to base school designations on partial data that may not be valid and may negatively impact the use of data for school improvement, we also understand that we would be not having data for future educational planning. So it's kind of a balancing act, if you will. The last piece, and if we could go to the next slide, is really the waiver from testing. And this is one that we are being asked about as well. And as we have already said, the primary purpose of test scores is to report the accountability model. However, test scores also provide information to parents and educators on what a student knows and can do. And I think Dr. Stegall hit on this very effectively in the beginning of the presentation. Without participation in the test, we would not have several pieces of data available at all. We would not even have data available that we could then determine how useful or not useful it is. It would just not be any data. And the first one on the list at the bottom of this slide is the analysis of individual and subgroup performance and needs, strengths, and gaps. And I think it's important to note individual, because there are individual benefits for I, Tammy, having a test score. There's a benefit for I and my subgroup having test scores as well. So without test scores, we would not have that information. And with the waiver from last year, we would not have that information for 2 years in a row. The other ones on this list are on the next couple of slides. I'm sure I will not read through these. You're very familiar with all of these. I'll highlight Read to Achieve, of course, that is in state statute, and also data for locals to inform hiring and placement of teachers. The next slide looks at the identification, which I think we've talked a great deal about already, of schools for improvement. The last two listed references data for comprehensive response to Leandro and other initiatives, and the innovative assessment pilot. So without testing, we would not have data for the innovative pilot to move that initiative forward as well. And then the last slide that I believe that I will be addressing is the next one. And this is just a reminder about the federal waivers. The federal waivers are in federal law, and these requirements that we've listed here are in law. And I would draw your attention to the last three. The last three are intentional and are really making the point that a waiver is not a release from federal law. A waiver is a way to accomplish federal law, but to do it in a different way. So if you look at the third bullet from the top, describe how the waiver will advance student academic achievement. The next one, describe methods used to monitor and regularly evaluate the effectiveness of the state's plan in response to the waiver. And then the last one, how the state will maintain or improve transparency and reporting to parents and to the public. So the waiver itself is required in federal law to not step away from the requirements in federal law, but to have a different way to do it. So this is the critical piece. And in a previous slide, we noted that Georgia applied for a waiver early on in August or September, and they were denied, and they were denied based on not meeting these statutory requirements that are in federal. This also requires public comment, and it also can be submitted to the U.S. Department of Education with a response within 120 days. The one difference is a waiver can be submitted at any time. It's on a rolling basis, so whenever it was decided to submit a waiver, then the state could do that. And then I think with that, I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Stegall.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. So as we mentioned, it's a lot to consider for the board. For the process for the waivers has been shared to eliminate testing and accountability. And again, especially the accountability piece for this academic year, the U.S. Department of Ed and the General Assembly would have to grant waivers. So this is a two-pronged approach. We would have to request waivers from the federal government and the state government. If a waiver were granted by the U.S. Department of Ed, the General Assembly would be asked to consider granting that waiver again in through the North Carolina General Statutes. If you go to the next slide. So as we've shown before, a number of stakeholders, parents, teachers, students, community members, General Assembly members, state board members, we understand the vital need of finding out what our students need, what they've gained over the last 9 months during COVID, making sure that we're meeting their needs. The testing a student, and testing has sometimes negative connotation, but testing for the sake of finding out how a student is progressing, what their strengths are, what the gaps are, and how we individually can help that student make up any gaps they have and help them grow. And those that are doing well, how to keep pushing them forward and helping them advance and support them in every way possible. given what we've shared and numerous stakeholder input that we have received, we are asking the state board to consider federal waivers for the 95% participation rate and a federal waiver for the accountability measures during this academic year. As Dr. Howard shared, this would mean we would have to be able to speak to some very important factors on how we will continue to advance student academic achievement if we do not have an accountability waiver, and how will we continue to find and monitor the student progress in meaningful ways and be transparent with parents and the public if we do not have our normal accountability measures. So there will be a lot of work ahead if we do apply for the waivers, but given our current status and the number of students who are at home and are virtual only, we feel it's most appropriate, in our opinion, to request those waivers from the federal government. Additionally, we're asking the state board to consider, if it allows, an emergency rule to pause the requirement that state exams count at least 20% of the student's final grade. With that, I will pause to see if there's questions, which I'm sure there are, and hopefully be able to answer those.
Dr. Stegall and Dr. Howard, one clarification question on the testing versus accountability. If we did get waivers, but we did continue with testing, we recognize that we still won't have the normal amount of testing data on every single student. Is that correct? But having some data is better than having no data at all.
And Dr. Howard can chime in, but our plan would be that we would test like we have in every year past. We would still seek to test as many students as possible. Yes, and so only those who did not participate would we not have data on. We wouldn't have truncated tests. We would continue to give the normal assessments. Dr. Howard, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, no, I would agree with that as well, that the opportunity for the assessment would continue.
All right, thank you. So what I'd like to do is start first with the addendum, which you will recall this relates to the lack of testing from last year and the lack of information this year. So fairly straightforward. Are there any questions on the recommendation for the addendum? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to the recommendation for the federal waivers on the 95% rule and the accountability pieces. So questions and comments on that, please. I know somebody has some.
Madam Chair, it's Mr. Ford.
Yes, Mr. Ford, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may just begin by saying thank you, Doctors Howard and Stegall. And I mean that sincerely. I know this has to be tough for y'all. And I'm certain that you all have any number of opinions and feelings on this. And so what you've made clear is that you all thought about this from multiple angles to a lot of the concerns you're hearing from the field. And so I just want to honor that and recognize that. As a stakeholder myself with, 4 kids who are all 100% virtual, and, a wife who, works doing outreach for McKinney, the unprecedented and irregular nature of this makes it extremely difficult for me to even testing for the purposes of accountability. One thing that cannot be denied is what you all stated. Testing itself, although the stigma is negative, it should be looked upon more as a measurement or an assessment. And I think that is important, even if it's just to assess the damage that's been done educationally and to look at that by many of the subgroups. I think given just there's no way for us to really know just how the sheer enormity of how much it's laid waste to the educational opportunities of our students. And so even if just to assess that, I think that's hugely important. That being said, and I apologize for mixing my comments here, Madam Chair, the accountability piece is unthinkable to me. And even as it concerns the 20%. of a student's grade. I do not think that the students who perhaps aren't showing up to class, aren't engaged, or maybe aren't even reachable at this point will be motivated by sort of dangling the fact that this will influence their grade, right? Because clearly the things that are preventing them from accessing learning aren't matters of motivation or individual interpersonal things. They're more structural, I would argue, in nature. That piece doesn't make sense to me in this environment. And so I appreciate the recommendation. I'd be remiss if I also didn't say, and you all have explained for validity reasons and that, you know, these tests cannot be administered, that I know that there are also concerns about the safety of teachers themselves, as well as families like mine whose students have been fully remote. And so I just wanted to, in my comments, acknowledge that as well. But to my fellow board members, you know, our intentions, I'm sure, are pure here. But to hold anybody accountable, any individual, any student, any school in this environment, the ultimate question we have to ask is, what exactly are we assessing? And what would these data even tell us? And how will we hold somebody accountable to that in such a precarious environment? So just wanted to say that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, this is Tony Jackson.
She's muted. Ms. Chemnitz, you're muted.
Go ahead, Dr. Jackson.
Okay, thank you. I would echo again what Mr. Ford just indicated, and I would take us back to the very onset of this meeting where we really had presentations about attending to the needs of the whole child. And if you just look at the graphic that's up right now, it really it speaks to, I think, the enormity of the decision right now. And on one side of it, it speaks very clearly to supporting and understanding what we need to do to help students either fill gaps or celebrate those that have accelerated. And then the other side of that really talks about just institutions and maintaining institutions and boxes that we have built. And so I would strongly encourage support of the waivers. My superintendent colleagues would hopefully support that. And on behalf of them, I would say that we believe the testing part could in fact be instructive for us. The accountability piece is going to be a challenge because of the many different ways in which we've had to operate. And more importantly, we always have time to rebuild those. And just as we would extend the window for some of the other things that we put out earlier, I think we can extend the window for this. I would add, this is probably the most consequential decision we're going to make around kids and extending grace to them as we begin to reconnect with them. And if the first thing that we do is assess and hold the students and adults accountable for a pandemic that they did not create, because that in effect is what we may end up doing, then in fact I would suggest that we think differently. And I would also add that the accountability piece measures teacher growth and things like that, and understanding clearly that many of our teachers have experienced the same trauma that our kids have. And I think we have to be sensitive to that as well. I think the middle ground, and I think the testing piece is important, where we can get some formative data to help us do right by our children. And we can talk about how we can achieve the accountability piece. So as a superintendent, I would support the waiver fully. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. One clarifying question, if I can interject. Dr. Stegall and Dr. Howard, if we did go forward with the request for the 2 federal waivers that you're recommending, what would the timing be on that? We would make the determination, the board would decide in January to go ahead with the request, and then what would we be looking at?
So Dr. Howard, you speak to it. Yeah, I think Dr. Howard is best.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Stegall. So once it is approved to submit the waiver, then the waiver would be and would be drafted and for approval, but it would also have to go out for public comment. So, and the requirement is that we follow the public comment process we always do. So that is typically 30 days. So the first step would be to get a final draft of the waiver request and then to put it out for public comment. And then we would submit it to the U.S. Department of Education. So I would anticipate no earlier than early February, possibly late February.
That it would be submitted.
Yes, they would be submitted, and then the department would have 120 days to give a response.
Okay, which is a close call. So I would submit, fellow board members, that it would be helpful to Dr. Howard and Dr. Stegall to come out of this meeting with some feeling, with at least a consensus among the board that we want them to proceed in what obviously is going to be a difficult task of composing the information that's going to go with that waiver request. So if everyone would keep that in mind and give us some input on that.
Ms. Camden, are we going to talk about the 20% as well? I don't want to jump ahead of you.
I'd like to sort of, if we can, get sort of to the federal waiver piece and do we want to move forward with that internally?
Okay, but okay. I just want to make sure we don't miss that part too. But yes,
thank you.
The department, State Superintendent Johnson, we fully support going forward with the federal waiver. Thank you.
Hearing nothing from other members of the board, I'm going to assume that means an indication that you would like to proceed with the process. All right, then let's do that. And thank you for the comments from Mr. Ford and Dr. Jackson. Superintendent, did you want to now talk about that?
Yeah, thank you. I know we're late in the day and I'll be brief. As you heard, thank you, Dr. Stegall. The administrative rule, that is what we are hearing the most concern about from educators and parents right now, or at least that's what my inbox is showing me, is we do have a lot of students and parents who've made the decision to do 100% virtual, and that's something that we wanted to make sure was possible for them over the summer. I myself am happily sending my daughter in person to school. Many other parents are as well. Many parents would like that opportunity, but I do respect that there are a lot of parents and students who are staying at home and staying virtual, and understand we need to get the message out there that we have expanded the window. Ms. Camps, I think you did a great job of really emphasizing that. That is good. But they are worried because if they're finishing up a course this semester and they're going to take the exam, they are worried that 20% of that exam would be included in their final grade. And again, these are parents who are letting us know that they've been really keeping their students at home, very careful, and they're very worried about a student having to go into a classroom environment to take a test just because of their grade. I am 100% sympathetic to that and want to try to get to a point where we can help those families. Dr. Stegall did say that there is a process to do an emergency rulemaking, but before we even get to that, there is agreement amongst myself, some other education leaders, some other members of the department, that the rule that is being pointed to for the 20% is not actually still valid and in force. And I'll very quickly try to explain why that is. In 2018, the General Assembly won a lawsuit against the State Board of Education in which the State Board was arguing that they are not subject to rulemaking. The state Supreme Court says they are subject to rulemaking. And in 2018, when that verdict came down, that decision came down, the General Assembly said to the State Board of Education, all of your rules are going to be made invalid unless you immediately start putting them through the process. The rule in question, the one that says the percentage of the grade, was not actually put through that process. So by that session law in 2018, by that law in its face, that rule would be invalid. Also, if I'm correct, that rule, as further proof that it is not valid, is actually being submitted by the state board now to the Rules Review Commission and is still on the agenda for the Rules Review Commission, which has questions about the rule. So there is belief, and I'm someone who believes this, that that rule is not actually in effect right now. And in fact, this is probably something the state board could make a determination on as soon as voting tomorrow, whether or not they want to have their policy of the 20% in the grade for those EOC exams or not. As you heard Dr. Stegall explain, there is policy reasoning behind having the rule. 20% of a grade encourages, and actually in this old rule, it actually said that everyone had to take the EOC. That is all found in that rule. But again, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and I would just encourage the state board to look at that policy and perhaps help these parents who have grave concerns.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson. I believe Chair Davis has some clarification on that. Is that correct, Eric?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Kamnitz. Really appreciate the superintendent's comments. We must be getting the same emails because I'm seeing very similar concerns that Superintendent Johnson expressed from parents and students about the 20% of grade rule, as well as concerns about coming into our schools to take these assessments in person. It does bring me back to last spring when we made a decision early on in this pandemic to go to a pass-fail approach for our high school students. And for many, that was the right answer. And we heard loudly from parents and students who appreciated that decision. We also heard loudly from those who said, I want my student to get a grade. They've worked hard for it. And I want them to graduate with that grade. And so I imagine this issue will split along similar lines. There'll be some students who the right answer is to waive the 20%, given the interruption or limitations of instruction this school year. And yet for other students, they will argue, and their parents will as well, that that end of course, end of grade assessment is their opportunity to really boost their grade. And they don't want to lose that opportunity. And so I point that out only to say that this is another one of those issues that sort of cuts both ways. And I think we really do need to think carefully about the ramifications of which way we go. And once we determine which way we want to go, I'm certain that this board will explore all options, whether it's rulemaking or some other method to implement that decision. The other comment I'd like to offer is particularly to this slide that's up now and to the comments of my colleague Ford and Superintendent Jackson. I'm aware that our sister state to the west, Tennessee, took an approach that sounds much like what Mr. Ford and Superintendent Jackson are proposing. And that is that we retain the benefits of testing and determining where our students are so we know how to move them forward out of this pandemic. But we go light on the consequences of those assessments for students and for the institutions, as Dr. Jackson offered. I think that's a sound approach to respond to the extraordinary times that we're in. I think it's critical that we not punish our institutions or our students for the situation that they're in, no cause of their own. But at the same time, I think an essential element of our education recovery from the pandemic is to get as much insight as we can about where students are academically and be able to determine strategies, resources, personnel about how to move our students forward. So I'll pause now to see if there is any objection from my colleagues on essentially that approach to moving forward.
Mr. Chair, I'll just briefly say that I very much appreciate your comments, and I think this is definitely an issue that I will hand off to Superintendent-elect Truitt, and she will be able to work with you all and come to a conclusion on this in January. I just want it to be very well clearly established, because I have been hearing from not just parents on this, but I've been hearing from educators in the field and educational leaders in the field that the state board's hands are not tied by an administrative rule on this 20%. In fact, the rule says it should be 25%. So that's just further proof that the rule is not actually enforced. But you are correct. There will be arguments on both sides, and this will be a policy decision for you, the board, and for the next state superintendent. Thanks.
Any other comments?
I would say, Chair Davis, that we take the opportunity to explore this further over the next few weeks, and clarify what our capabilities are.
All right. Vice Chair Duncan.
I think we seem to come to a consensus that we should ask for the waiver with respect to the 95%. If I understood correctly from the reporting, that it would take some period of time before we get the result. With respect to that request, up to 120 days, we should not expect something by return mail. So my first thought is, it would be important to know the 95% outcome. That is, if you had a waiver before you looked at some absolute firm setting on the 20% participation aspect, because, like it or not, as was described in the report, that there were some policy considerations that helped make that of assistance in reaching the 95% participation rate, if that is truly imposed upon us and remains imposed upon us as we go forward. I agree with what everybody said in terms of this should be for assessment purposes, not for evaluation purposes this year of our schools and our teachers. I think the time that we wait to get a determination on the 95% should give us the ability to then make a very thoughtful decision with respect to the 20%. We have offered, I think we set out, and I think we should reiterate that the window of time for that kind of testing can be pushed back all the way back to June, so there's not, the one flexibility that's clear, I don't think there's any debate about, is that can be pushed back. And we all know that somebody who's just finished it, of course, will probably score better than if they take the test later, but if it's not a personal consequence related to it, that's a different situation. And the local districts will also have the ability to set the scale in a very generous way in light of the circumstances that are going to exist. And I think school districts will respond to that in an appropriate way, and will set the scale in a way that's fully fair to the students in these unheard of circumstances. So what I think makes it really difficult is the 95% situation. It's not in the waiver posture if we sit here now. If we can get that clarified, I think we can then go forward and make the kind of policy decisions. Hopefully in January, hopefully we get that quick response. It might take a little bit longer, but we can get a response and then we can make the additional decisions. In the meantime, encourage this pace and some kind of testing program that does not have built into it some great deal of flexibility as of the present point in time. Which I think is what is maybe a summary of where we're headed or what we're trying to do for the moment.
Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan. I think that gives us some direction as we move forward in this, and we will continue to work on exploring what the options are for the 20% and see if we can find a way that doesn't disadvantage any of our students. Any further comments on this item before we move on to the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, we have 3 consent items. SLA 3, which is the reappointment or replacement of Compliance Commission members. Dr. Howard, this is a different list than the one that we saw last month. Is that correct? There's a couple of new names.
Yes, there are 2 additional names, and I apologize. I would have to double check to make sure I told you which 2 were new. But there are 2 additional names, yes.
All right, well, if there are board members who want that information, we'll be sure to supply it before we vote tomorrow on this item. Thank you. SLA 4 is a report to the General Assembly, the education of children in private psychiatric residential treatment facilities. That is a very straightforward annual report that that Ms. Thomas's department does every year. And then finally, SLA 5, report to the General Assembly, the statewide administration of the testing program. And that we saw last month from Dr. Howard. It just lists all the tests that are being administered statewide. So any questions on those? If not, I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you, Ms. Candace, and to the entire team that participated in the SLA committee work. That concludes today's updates and committee reports. We'll have the remaining reports tomorrow during our board meeting. I want to thank our colleagues, our advisors, EPI staff, and others who contributed to today's meeting. And I now ask for a motion to go into closed session and note for the audience and online listeners that following closed session, this December 2nd, 2020 meeting will adjourn immediately. Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes, thank you, Chair Davis. And if I could make one quick statement before I make the motion. Tomorrow during the BizOp meeting, we have the long session expansion budget discussion. That's a very important discussion. If everyone can take the time tonight or in the morning early to look at the presentation of the items in the various areas and compile your thoughts about what the highest priorities need to be consistent with the board's strategic plans, the board various efforts and proposals in terms of how we go forward. If you could put together your list of the strongest priorities so we can have a meaningful discussion with everyone involved in putting forward those priorities and start the process of narrowing and focusing on what our top priorities are going to be. It would be wonderful if we could use every one of these items. That's likely not going to be possible, and so we do have to work on prioritization. Your time tonight, I think, will lead to a very helpful discussion tomorrow, so I would ask everyone if you possibly can to do that tonight or in the morning, despite what a long day it's been. And with that, I move that we go into closed session to consult with our attorneys in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, and to protect the confidentiality of records from local school administrative units or its officers or employees under NC General Statute Section 115C-13.
Motion by Vice Chair Duncan. Is there a second?
Olivia seconds.
Second by Dr. Oxendine. Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll to capture the vote?
Yes, sir. Dr. Oxendine?
Yes.
Ms. Chemnitz? Ms. Chemnitz? Ms. Chemnitz?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers?
Yes.
Mr. Chastain? Mr. Chastain? Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Chair Davis?
Yes. Motion carries. Let's immediately go into closed session. If those of you who will not be involved in closed session can drop the line. Dr. Townsend Smith, you can let us know. We're there.